Well, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Richard Stevenson, and I'm the director of Stevenson Dental Solutions in San Dimas, California. We are going to discuss today the margin elevation procedure and how it can be applied to onlay preparations for ceramics, inlay preparations, and even full crowns. We're going to start the case today with an extracted tooth, which I've mounted in the typodont, which shows significant problems. You got wear on the occlusal, exposing dentin. You have an old composite restoration with significant problems and flash. And also there's decay that runs deep gingivally, and there's decay on the mesial as well. So this is certainly going to be an onlay preparation. I think many people would choose to do a crown here, but we're going to see if we can get away with an onlay. So I like to use a 330 burr for the initial depth cut because it provides you with a really great way to measure 1.5 millimeters. We can verify that 1.5 utilizing an RGS-1, which is 1.5 millimeters. So let's start with an 847 KR. We could also use one of the winter system burrs available through Brasseler for the same purpose. I find those to be very helpful as well. The object here is to keep the burr perpendicular to the occlusal table, or in line with the line of draw of the tooth itself. You notice in this case I'm not removing the existing composite before I start the preparation. This is an option. You'll have to use your clinical judgment to decide whether this technique or removing it and building it up first is appropriate. You can see from this mesial view the amount of taper that we would like to see in the final ceramic inlay. Obviously, the outline form needs to be widened so that we go past the existing composite restoration. Note the decay on the mesial. You can see we're establishing an MOD inlay without dropping the boxes first before we enter into the boxes. This provides us with a nice initial outline form. We're keeping with the same burr. If for some reason you want to use a more narrow burr, that's certainly fine. In this case, I think we have plenty of room. So we continue by dropping the distal box more gingivally, understanding of course that there's a lot of decay and an old composite restoration extending far below where we'd like to be. So let's get more extension first before we worry about that gingival. The next goal, of course, is to try to obtain a clean periphery, even at the most gingival aspect. I like utilizing this off-angle chisel. This happens to be a 44 off-angle chisel, to remove loose enamel rods and flick off any pieces of flash of composite from the prior restoration. So let's continue to move the diamond more gingivally to obtain clean tooth structure on this really critical marginal area. I find that using hand instruments in combination with diamonds is really effective. So you can see now on the distal we have established a nice clean tooth structure. We have, of course, some decay remaining, and let's go ahead and remove all of that right now. A 4-round burr, a 6-round burr, and 8-round burr are my favorites, and you can use these in electric handpiece running at about 10,000 RPM. Clinically, I like to use water spray when I'm doing all of these procedures, of course. I think at this point we can feel pretty good that we have clean tooth structure around the periphery, but we have some irregularities that obviously need to be smoothed out, and we have some defects that I'd like to block out a little bit with a glass ionomer. But let's focus on this margin elevation area. We want to move the margin so that it's above the cervical line. That's really the goal for margin elevation, or also known as open sandwich technique. This procedure is going to start with a matrix modification. So let's start with the Toffelmeier system here, the Toffelmeier retainer and the matrix band. I like utilizing the typical universal matrix band with this particular process. I've been doing this technique now since 1996. Make a mark so that you're using about half the thickness of the band, and remove the roof, if you will, of this matrix area. Bands are now available through Stevenson Dental Solutions that are very similar to what I'm producing here. Of course, they're machine made and they're a little bit more sophisticated, so if you want to have them pre-made, you can certainly check that out. I like to make them myself because there are nuances that I like to factor in when I'm doing the margin elevation. Sometimes I need to have a little thinner band, and sometimes I need to have the band a little bit taller. If you don't cut this area away, the band will not adapt well to the root surface, so it must be usually smaller than the original thickness of the band. So just in your typical matrix assembly fashion, lasso the tooth and then tighten it up so that it constricts around the root area. So you're going to want to place the matrix band far enough gingivally that it is not negatively impacted by the contours of the enamel above the root. You want it to wrap around this matrix area, and don't worry about interproximal contacts at all. We're only going to be adding material to the distal, so this is the area that we want to close properly with a wedge. Oftentimes you'll find you won't even need to use a wedge because it adapts really well. I'm using a wedge here that's made by Stevenson Dental Solutions. Now notice I'm using the wedge on its side so that it helps to close this area. Wedges can be used in all different ways to achieve the results that you want. We're now going to utilize a glass ionomer instead of a composite. This is a traditional glass ionomer, and I prefer this over composite because of its chemical bond to the root surface. We're going to be utilizing a polyacrylic acid as well to prepare the surface. After about 15 or so seconds, you can rinse off this polyacrylic acid, and the dentin will now have no smear layer, and the material will be able to bond very effectively. After rinsing and suctioning off extra moisture, we're now going to go ahead and mix up the traditional glass ionomer. I like using these little capsules because of the accuracy of the mix. Tap the capsule on the countertop a few times, activate the plunger, mix it for 10 seconds in your triturator, and then go ahead and assemble it in the gun for dispensing in the mouth. Very simple. Usually it takes 4 clicks for the material to extend outside of the syringe tip. It can be easily injected into the area, and then you want to do just a little bit of manipulation just to get it a little smoother on top, and then the key now is to wait. We don't want to manipulate the product at this point, but wait for it to obtain a more matte finish. Once you have a matte finish on the surface, and push it down quite easily in mass to obtain very excellent marginal seal. No need for a flowable composite, no need for a paste composite. This product will work incredibly well in this particular situation. It has extremely high compressive strength and is biocompatible. I can't think of a better material in the world than glass ionomer to replicate dentin. It's truly a biomimetic product. You can see the excellent seal that you achieve with this technique. You can see the location of the margin on the distal. It's even higher up in the tooth than the mesial. It's pretty amazing. That'll make it much easier to cement the onlay. I now like to block out some of the negative contours internally with 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐿C Lining LC, which is a resin-modified glass ionomer. There are other products available. I'm just using this one today. You do dispense it on a pad and you mix it up like any cement you would typically mix. I like using this particular spatula because it's got a very small spatula on one end and a little die-cal type instrument on the other, which is really easy to use when placing the material in the tooth. When you're applying this in the tooth, it's really good to let the metal touch the dentin, vibrate it a little bit, and you'll watch the material flow beautifully into the preparation. I don't have to do this, I just like doing it so I have a more uniform ceramic restoration. Uniformity in ceramics has been shown to be more accurate than ceramics that have variability in their thickness. A more uniformly thick 𝐜𝐨𝐬𝐴X restoration or zirconia restoration is a far better restoration to mill or to press, depending on the technique you're using. After light curing, it's now set and ready to go. So let's go ahead and convert this preparation into the MOD onlay. We're going to go ahead and start today with an 8856-016. You could also use the winter system burr the fine one that is 6 millimeters in length and 1 millimeter tip. I found them both to work incredibly well. We're going to start with the C-plane, keeping the burr so that it's parallel to the original incline or the inclines of the adjacent teeth, and using the thickness of the burr to give us a gauge as how much we're reducing. Now that we've completed the C-plane, let's move the burr over to the functional cusp and make the A-plane. Once again, judging how much we're removing by understanding the thickness of the diamond instrument and watching the wall that we are reducing and making sure that that wall is the full thickness of the maximum part of that particular burr. We're now ready for the B-plane. The B-plane is going to parallel the adjacent teeth. It's also going to put the cusp tips of this reduced preparation in line with the molar behind it and that Vonlay in front of it. So that shoulder on the lingual is not really a shoulder so much as it is a fillet margin like you see on the right. It's got a rounded internal and it has a declination angle that's about 15 degrees, maybe 10 degrees decline downward, so it's not exactly a shoulder. And I think this is a margin that we're all looking to do with all of our ceramics, but we're just calling it by the wrong name. It's not a deep chamfer, it is a fillet. So here we are refining this fillet and also blending from the fillet to the other areas with rounded transitions. As you know, on ceramics, we don't want to have any sharp edges that could cause stress areas in the ceramic or the tooth structure. It certainly makes the fabrication of these restorations much easier. So a little bit of rounding between all the sharp edges is really essential at this point. And if you find it helpful to use a slower speed, either an electric or the air-driven handpiece, that's a good idea. But all of those little sharp edges that you see need to be removed, even the one on the lingual side between the vertical wall of the shoulder and the C-plane. We're also going to place a little bit of a bevel to support the enamel rods, and I think that this is a design that is consistent to grab on to more enamel and to make sure there are no undermined enamel rods or more susceptible enamel rods, that slight little tip. And we're going to do the same thing here on the lingual. Now this is not a steep bevel, this is a very, very slight downward slope just to give you a little bit more grab onto the enamel. It's really a enamel reinforcing ceramic mini bevel. It's not a 45-degree bevel like you would do with a gold inlay or a 60-degree bevel. It's just about 10, maybe 15 degrees, just enough to grab onto those enamel rods and make sure that the enamel rods are not going to break during provisionalization or after you cement the restoration. So here we are with the final preparation. Always things you can improve, particularly when I look back over the video and I see this footage. I can see about 10 things I'd like to change, but that's the practice of dentistry, isn't it? We are always reevaluating and assessing ourselves and looking for ways to improve in the future. But this is the result we achieved today. So thanks for watching. In our next video, we're going to show the 3/4 crown on this molar. I think it'll be fun. Take care, everybody.